Dave Kranzler, I ask you, why did the price of the metals, not just silver, but all of them, get hammered the same exact time on a Tuesday afternoon? Hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. And fortunately, it is the best time of the week again, which obviously means it is time for Denver Dave Kranzler's weekly silver and gold market update. And with that said, there is the man, the legend, what do we call it? You were one of the silver market wizards in the big silver short. And Dave, by the way, did you know that it looks like I've been invited on the management board of the Silver Hall of Fame? So keep that in mind there, big slugger.
It's a good feather in your cap.
Yeah, well, it was funny after Silverfest. I was wondering, has anybody ever thought to do that? Do we have a Silver Hall of Fame? Turns out the guys who run Cambridge House do. They've been looking for some help reviving that, as well as the Silver Saloon, which could be a nice online hangout for silver fans. And that's something I've been interested in because you remember those video booths we had there?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, at least as I've mapped this out, I use the template of sports radio a lot, where at the end of the day, we're saying buy silver, buy gold. One day it's going to go up because these guys are going to print like sailors. But I think often what it is that people like being able to express it. And it's like stuff we know, but it's like just the ability to interact with other people. And sometimes just something like saying it out loud and someone saying, yes, I'm seeing the same thing, goes a long way. So, anyway, a lot of fun stuff going to be coming up here. And with all that said, how are you today, Dave?
I'm doing well. Thank yourself.
Well, I'm doing quite well over here. Been an interesting week in the silver market. And let me pull up the chart because Dave Kranzler, in a world we live in with JP Morgan and the spoofers and all that other stuff, I ask you on Tuesday afternoon, we see silver was just hovering right around $25. You remember that clip of Bart Chilton I love playing where I actually asked him, in that example I said 20, but if you change the number, it's the exact same where I said, does it hover? And then eventually you kick in the algos and then wham. But Dave Kranzler, I ask you, why did the price of the metals, not just silver, but all of them, get hammered the same exact time on a Tuesday afternoon?
Think it was actually Tuesday morning. See at the bottom of the chart there, 8 a.m.
Yes, you're.
And you see right there where you just had your arrow where it starts to head downhill.
Yes,
that's almost exactly the point at which the floor hours for the COMEX open up. It's 8:20 a.m. for gold, and I believe 8:25 for silver. It might be 8:30. So it's a standard manipulation device that's been used for as long as I've been involved in this sector, going back to 2001, where as soon as the COMEX opens, boom, a lot of paper, gold and silver hit the floor and hit the Globex computer system. So in that sense, there were a lot more sellers of paper, gold, and silver than there were buyers of paper, gold, and silver. And it's also designed to trigger the stop losses that the hedge funds have set. So it's an age-old trick that they use, and that's where the real manipulation is, not in the spoofing.
And Dave, could you just, so that people understand the context from which you're coming here, because you did work on a trading desk, so you've seen many of these same schemes, whether they're recycled, twisted a little bit, but could you just share briefly your background so that people understand the expertise with which you speak?
Well, I was trading junk bonds in the 90s institutionally for Bankers Trust, and that market was was a lot less liquid than it was now, which made it even easier to manipulate if you wanted to try and run the price up on something, or you wanted to try and beat the price down so that you could buy it. So when you're trying to get something done, like you got a big position and you get a tap on the shoulder and your boss's boss says, I don't like this position, because your boss's boss is involved in corporate financing activities and sees inside numbers, you know right then that you got to start unloading that position. You want to try and unload it at the best possible price. So, you might throw some bids in underneath the market, which would be your spoofing. And you want, as soon as you see those bids fill in above you, because the market all of a sudden thinks there's a big buyer, you pull your bid and wham, you start unloading as much of the paper as you can into those bids. So, the twist on the COMEX is that the banks, they're not, it's not like they're trying to sell silver and gold. They're trying to short it. They're trying to control the price. They're trying to push the price lower. And so they just go in there and start slamming bids. And then that triggers the stop losses, and the hedge fund algos kick in, and the algos say, oh, there's downside momentum, so let's join in the fun and start selling paper. So that's how that game is played, and that's what we saw on Tuesday. It was as blatant as it gets.
So Dave,
it was almost like J.P. Morgan was giving the market an FU. Oh, you think we care about $1 billion fine for, or whatever the number was, for spoofing the market? Here, we'll show you what you think of that, because we've made multiples of that manipulating the gold and silver market for the last year. So, $1 billion, that's the cost of doing business. Guess what? Our compensation bonuses are going to go up 14% this year, despite that fine.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what I've been wondering, where, again, here you see they settled the lawsuit, $920 million for spoofing. I was going to bring it up. You brought it up in your own words before I got the chance to. Was this a spoof?
No, that was the unloading of a ton of paper contracts onto the COMEX for the purpose of triggering stop losses and to get the hedge funds to dump long positions. And then underneath there, where the market flattens out, JP Morgan will turn around, or whatever bank is doing it, and they'll become a buyer, and they have instant profits. They'll cover some of their short. It's not like they're shorting this thing and staying short. Although they, isn't it funny that the banks always seem to be the entities that have the swap dealers that always have a perpetual massive short position, and even if you net out the longs that they have, their net short position is always multiples, not only of the COMEX silver inventory, reported inventory. And sometimes it's it can be up to 6 months or a year's worth of silver production. How is that at all an economic market? That's a market that's designed specifically for the purpose of controlling the price of gold and silver.
Yeah, well, I would say so. And fortunately, there's this great website, barchart.com. Let's see if we can pull this one up here. Because you can see, okay, here's our commercials, the red line. So the farther, so you can see there's 0. So basically, the lower it is, the more short the banks are. You can see there, they get really short. There, the price comes down. They don't really get back to even, but you can see it matches up here as they get flat. Price starts going up. All right, next big move here. Sure enough, it's the peak of when they're short. What is, again, we talked about last week, some guys think we're nuts because we said, it seems a little odd that you can just write any amount of paper, hammer it on. The guy who called that conspiracy theory, Dave, is this a coincidence, or?
I don't know, ask that guy. I would ask him what he thinks of that pattern. That's been a serial pattern for 15, 20 years at least.
I remember when I looked at some of these charts, it's actually fascinating. You can flip through, by all means. I know some people are like, well, how can you just silver? They're all manipulated. I'm like, I agree. And the guy was like, how come you don't have a problem with JP Morgan manipulating the treasuries? I'm like, sure, get him out of, I mean, I don't know. It's like, I'm not trying to sit around here, like, revolve my day around what anybody else should do. But yeah, to the degree, if, I don't know, I always thought if I had even attempted something like this when I was on a trading floor, I just assumed I'd be in jail the next day. And maybe I'm naive, but it's like, there's not, I
Well, the
don't know.
banks are exempt from criminal prosecution like that. I mean, we know all the corruption that went on in the banking system that led to the 2008 credit market collapse. No one went to jail.
I mean, Corzine doesn't go to jail. He launches a new fund, and it's
right,
like,
exactly. There's a good case in point. He got caught red-handed. He was caught red-handed. So he spent a couple years on the beach, and he comes back and resurrects himself as raising money for a hedge fund. It's crony capitalism. That's what it is, and the banks have control of the regulatory mechanism, the Justice Department, the CFTC, the SEC.
Well, I don't think I have it pulled up here. I wanted to discuss it with you. Did you see that James McDonald, who is one of the commissioners who was thumping his chest for the JP Morgan fines, there was a Wall Street Journal article where it's like now he doesn't know whether he's going to go work for a bank straight out of there, which I don't know what you say to that one, but I did have another story I wanted to pull up for you here, Dave. You did catch the thing with the U.S. Mint last week, how people were concerned because the prices were rising?
Yes.
Which, again, we had Andy Scheckman on, and he mentioned how it was really just the numismatic, yet I thought this was interesting. In order for the U.S. Mint to cover rising costs to meet its fiduciary responsibility to operate at no net cost, rising costs. But Jerome Powell said we're worried about the low inflation. But they said
his new plan to stimulate inflation must be working.
I mean, it's just interesting if you actually look. I don't know. Fine, that's one example, but maybe the costs that the U.S. Mint faces are not included in the CPI. Is perhaps that it?
I doubt it. Look, anything that goes up in price is excluded from the CPI calculation.
Yeah. And speaking of things that go up, Dave, do we even have the debt ceiling anymore? I like thinking about that.
Wait, what's the debt ceiling? We never had a debt ceiling.
I mean, it just kind of disappeared. And what would you say are the probabilities that there will be a question about the debt ceiling in any of the election coverage?
None, zero. No one cares about it anymore.
I hear you. Although I did remember the other question that I wanted to ask you. So fine, we get it. Paper contracts, spoofing, hammering bids, whatever different things happen.
They don't need to worry about a debt ceiling because MMT, modern monetary theory, says you can just print money and fund the government debt. You don't need to worry about whether someone's going to buy those bonds. You just print the money and fund those bonds.
Well, that seems to be the way it's going.
There's a great chart on the Crescat Capital. They put out an article. I didn't see the whole article. I saw the chart, though. It was a chart that showed the money supply and the government spending deficit. And they're going in opposite directions. The deficit's headed towards hell, and the money supply is headed towards Pluto. So that's MMT right there.
Yeah, well,
free lunch. Hey, free lunch.
Dave, we can start keeping an eye on this one and slow down a little bit. Remember there was a couple of weeks where it was like going up by a trillion by the time we finished the episode. It's amazing that you could have the whole, just the sheer number of channels and people and resources and money that is spent to invested in covering the whole political cycle, but no talk.
Well, there's no demand. No one's holding the government accountable for that, and they don't need to be held accountable, because whenever they need to issue more bonds, they don't have to worry about whether the Chinese or the Japanese are going to buy those bonds. It's the Fed will buy them. I don't think anyone in this country cares about the money supply or the amount of treasury debt outstanding.
Dave, are we in agreement that?
Well, I care about it and you care about it, but
Yeah,
the average Joe doesn't care about it.
Too, man. We got a few people watching too, so there's that.
They're just, the average Joe's just worried about, what style of mask he or she's going to wear into the next restaurant they go to or the next grocery store.
And I think our audience is interested in what type of mask Denver Dave wears when he goes into a restaurant. I did. I went to the gym. I'm in New Jersey today, so I went to a gym in New Rochelle, and I have this mask, which apparently is not safe enough. You need one with loops around the ear. So I almost got tossed out. Whoops, we'll drop that phone there for a moment. But yeah, maybe next week you could come on, you could wear your mask. And Dave, I don't know if I should go this far out on the limb, but I am going to find a way. My Halloween costume this year is going to be impressive. Let's just say that. I got something special planned in honor of, at least we finally have $20 silver this year. And again, speaking of silver, before we wrap up today, I know you got a couple meetings and journals to write, but given all this, all right, we have the never-ending debt. We have manipulation. We have silver doing this, gold doing that. What is going to drive the price of silver and gold for people who are watching this and they hear and they get it? At the end of the day, what determines how we see the price react?
Well, I mean, if you strip away the manipulation, you showed one of the big primary drivers with that debt to the penny graphic that you had. There's a lot more of that coming. Make no mistake about that. It's not like, for the highly touted amount of economic bounce we're allegedly having, it's not generating enough tax revenues to offset the increase in government spending. So you're going to see a much higher spending deficit. You're going to see much higher debt levels required to fund that spending deficit. You're going to see a lot more money printing, because that's what it's going to take. The Fed has a mandate right now to maintain zero interest rates, basically, and they've been doing their best to cap the yield on the longer end, and part of that process means they have to soak up a lot of government debt. I mean, I think the Fed's by far the largest holder of government debt now. They have to soak up a lot of the extra bonds that are being issued, because if they don't, all the foreigners that have been funding it for the last 40 years, they're gonna demand a higher interest rate. So it's the money printing, it's the deteriorating fiscal and financial condition of the U.S. government, and it's at some point there's going to start, and we're already seeing it. I mean, gold's gone up from 250 to over 1900 since 2001. That's not the price of gold rising. That's the value of the dollar depreciating. It reflects a growing lack of confidence in the integrity of the U.S. dollar.
Well, I hear you, and
that's a longer term thing, because those things happen gradually over time. We've seen this happen gradually over time since 1971, right? Where the dollar's basically lost over 98% of its value versus gold since 1971.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me, I love, back, perhaps 2008 was the best example, where, the government gets, does these bailouts and then they get involved. It's like they're running a hedge fund. I love the government sources of revenue. Another one of my favorites, when one of these articles pops up, U.S. advances 3 arms sales packages to Taiwan. It's like printing money and selling guns, main industries of the U.S. government. And, I guess that's what will drive votes. And I agree with you. That's, I know some people don't want to hear manipulation, this or that, but to me, it always seemed like the paper market will drive the COMEX price. And at some point, I think sooner than later, but it's like, I don't know, maybe what if guys like you and I, we invested a lot in gold and silver, and let's say it didn't really go up or down all that much in our lifetime, but your kids, were living like in luxury, for generations to come. I mean, I don't know what the timeline is, but it seems inevitable when you look at what's happening. And Dave, actually, one more before we wrap up. Are we in agreement that we will never see the stock market crash in nominal terms?
Man, that's a complex theoretical question.
Got him. I got the old man on that one.
For me, it kind of goes back in 2005. I was exchanging emails with a good friend of mine. He's very, very bright, and he had an interesting question. Are we going to see? And this was back then, so where the Dow was, wherever it was. Are we going to see? At some point, are we going to see 30,000 on the Dow and $30,000 gold, or $3,000 on the Dow and 3,000 on the Dow index and $3,000 gold? Because at some point, the Dow gold ratio will revert back to 1-to-1. I just, who knows when.
Well, it happened
in 1980. There was a 1-to-1 Dow gold ratio.
You want to know who knows all about that?
I'm on the edge of my seat.
Like it's like a quiet excitement. Well, Dave, if you want the answers to that and anything else in the gold and silver
guessing
markets,
it's your next guest.
No, it's investmentresearchdynamics.com, and you click on the Mining Stock Journal tab, bam, and then you get this. I mean, for $20 a month, 2 issues, and look at that. Look at all the cash in that tractor. What's with all this fiat? How about, why don't you get like a crane and scoop out some silver, or that's a little,
no, you take that and you convert it into gold and silver.
Yeah, well, you can take the cash and call your buddy Yara, or email her at Arcadia at Miles Franklin, who is our sponsor tonight. Dave, American Silver Eagles $4.79 over spot.
Well, I'll tell you what, if they smash the price of gold and silver overnight, I am going to text Yara and have her buy me some more Silver Eagles.
It's your VIP gold dealer, which is one of the cool things about being a celebrity like Denver Dave Kranzler. Dave, thank you as always for joining me and shedding some light. I know there's some degree, maybe we touch on these things over and over again, but I think there's new people coming in and there's new attention on the markets, and people wonder, why the heck did these things get hammered this week? And I appreciate you putting that in good context.
Well, Chris, let me tell you, if you had half as much fun as I did doing this show, it means I had twice as much fun as you did.
Wow. Well, that is a complex fraction that people can think about while they listen to Andy Schechtman's physical silver and gold market update, which is coming your way now.